The Wild West was more than just dusty trails and shootouts. It was a land of untamed extremes where the bizarre often took center stage. From mountains of skulls to notorious criminals whose skin was made into shoes, the frontier was full of strange and unsettling tales. These stories, captured in bizarre photographs and twisted legends, reveal a side of the West that goes far beyond the gunfights and gold rushes we've come to know. As we get into these shocking images and the bizarre events behind them, be prepared to uncover the strangest corners of Wild West history, where reality and legend blur in the most unexpected ways. One of the most iconic and haunting images from the late 19th century is a photograph of a towering mountain of bison skulls. Taken in 1892 outside Michigan Carbon Works in Rogeville, Michigan, the photo captures two men posing proudly atop the skeletal remains of North America's once mighty bison population. Just a few decades earlier, between 30 and 60 million bison roamed the Great Plains. By the time this photograph was taken, fewer than 500 bison remained in the wild. The slaughter of bison, driven by expanding westward settlements and growing market demands for hides and bones, marked one of the most devastating examples of human exploitation of wildlife. The bones in the photo were to be ground into fertilizer and used in other industrial products, like glue and bone china. As we gaze upon the massive pile of bison skulls symbolizing the end of a species, the next photograph reveals an even more intimate glimpse into the final moments of life. In the Victorian era, death was often commemorated in a peculiar and unsettling way through post-mortem photography. The practice became common in the mid-1800s, a time when many families couldn't afford to have regular portraits taken. Instead, they often waited until a loved one passed away to commission a photograph as a lasting memento. These photographs, featuring the deceased posed to appear as though they were merely sleeping, were cherished keepsakes. The rise of the daguerreotype, an early form of photography invented in 1839, made it more accessible for families to preserve the likeness of their departed. While modern audiences may find these images disturbing, post-mortem photography was seen as a way to honor the dead and keep their memory alive, in a time when death was a frequent visitor. As the stillness of post-mortem portraits captured the essence of death in a dignified manner, the next photograph we'll explore shows a more violent end. The image of a notorious outlaw, his masked face forever frozen in infamy. William Brazenbill Brazelton was an infamous stagecoach robber in the Wild West, known for his audacious heists and signature mask. Born in 1849 in Missouri, Brazelton moved to Arizona in the 1870s and quickly made a name for himself as one of the most daring outlaws of his time. He committed a series of stagecoach robberies in both Arizona and New Mexico, often working alone, masked and armed. One of the most shocking images of Brazelton comes after his death in 1878, where he was photographed wearing his notorious mask. After being tracked down by a posse and killed near Tucson, Arizona, Brazelton's body was photographed both with and without the mask. While Brazelton's masked infamy lived on through photographs, another notorious figure's exploits would leave behind an even more gruesome legacy. In 1881, a notorious cattle rustler met an unexpected and gruesome end in Rawlins, Wyoming. After a failed train robbery and the murder of two lawmen, he was captured, but his story didn't end there. Following his lynching, his body was subjected to one of the strangest fates in history. His skin was tanned and turned into shoes, which were later worn to a special event. As if that wasn't eerie enough, parts of him were preserved in a whiskey barrel. Today, these unsettling remnants, including the shoes, are on display in a museum, forever linking this outlaw to a morbid chapter in Wild West history. But what's more haunting than a pair of human leather shoes? Perhaps a tale of survival where a single mark changes the course of a lifetime. In 1851, Olive Oatman, then 14 years old, and her family were attacked by a group of Native Americans, likely the Tolkapaya of the Yavapai, while traveling westward through present-day Arizona. The attackers killed most of her family, sparing only Olive, her younger sister Marianne, and her older brother Lorenzo, who was left for dead but survived. Olive and Marianne were taken captive and forced into slavery by the Yavapai, performing menial tasks like gathering food and carrying water. After about a year, the sisters were traded to the Mojave tribe. The Mojave treated the sisters more kindly, giving them land to farm and integrating them into the tribe. However, tragedy struck when Mary Ann died of starvation during a drought, leaving Olive alone among the Mojave. During her time with them, Olive received distinctive blue tattoos on her chin and arms, a practice among the Mojave to ensure that members would be recognized in the afterlife. In 1856, Olive was released after negotiations led by a Yuma Indian messenger, and she returned to American society. Her story became widely known, and she later traveled the country sharing her harrowing experiences. From the desert captivity to the rails of fortune, a different kind of pursuit unfolded. This time, the prize wasn't survival, but something far more tangible. In the early morning hours of June 2, 1899, the Wilcox train robbery became one of the most famous heists in the American West. A Union Pacific train traveling through Albany County, Wyoming, was halted by outlaws who flagged it down before it reached a wooden bridge. The armed men forced the train crew to separate the locomotive from the rest of the cars. Once the engine crossed the bridge, the robbers detonated dynamite, obliterating the wooden structure. They turned their attention to a mail car carrying a safe filled with cash and valuables. Using more dynamite, they blew open the safe, reportedly escaping with up to $36,000, a significant sum for the time. Though the robbery initially went unsolved, it was later traced to Butch Cassidy's gang, the Wild Bunch. Law enforcement scrambled to track down the culprits, but the gang's knowledge of the rugged terrain made capture difficult. But not all plans end with such clean escapes. In some cases, things go terribly wrong, leaving nothing but lifeless bodies and grim photos. On October 5, 1892, the Dalton gang attempted a bold, simultaneous robbery of two banks in Coffeyville, Kansas. The plan was straightforward: rob both the Condon Bank and the First National Bank at the same time, then escape with a large haul. However, the gang underestimated the vigilance of the local citizens. As the robbery unfolded, armed townspeople quickly gathered, leading to a violent shootout that would claim the lives of several gang members. When the dust settled, four of the outlaws, Grant Dalton, Bob Dalton, Bill Power, and Dick Broadwell, lay dead, their lifeless bodies later arranged for a grim public display. This photograph of the deceased gang members, lined up in a row, became an infamous piece of American outlaw history. While this image captures the end of one story, another unfolded that blurred the lines between myth and reality, captivating the world for years to come. In 1871, William Buffalo Bill Cody had already made a name for himself as a frontier scout, buffalo hunter, and army guide. A photograph from that year shows him standing proudly, rifle in hand, surrounded by trophies of his wilderness achievements. The image captures more than just a hunter. It symbolizes the spirit of the American West during its expansion period. Cody had gained fame for his role in helping the U.S. Army during the Indian Wars, where he served as a chief scout for the 5th Cavalry. His reputation was further cemented when he began hunting buffalo to supply meat for the Union Pacific Railroad workers, earning the moniker Buffalo Bill after reportedly killing over 4,000 buffalo in just 2 years. Cody later transitioned to show business, creating the show Buffalo Bill's Wild West in 1883, which dramatized the frontier life and Indian battles. The show became a sensation, bringing the mythology of the Old West to audiences across the United States and Europe. However, much of what he presented was exaggerated for entertainment. This 1871 photo offers a glimpse into the early years of a man who would become one of the most famous figures to blur the line between reality and legend in American history. As Cody turned frontier life into a spectacle for the masses, real-life danger was never far from those living on the edge of the wilderness. The Wild West was known for its perilous encounters, and young Jimmy McKin Santiago was no stranger to danger. Living with his family in the lower Mimbres Valley of New Mexico, Santiago's life changed dramatically at the age of 11 or 12 when he and his brother Martin were approached by a group of Chiricahua Apache led by the infamous Geronimo. Tragically, Martin was killed on the spot, and Jimmy was taken captive. The Apache group transported him far from home, leaving the grief-stricken boy to adapt to his new reality. Surprisingly, Jimmy developed a connection with his captors, learning their language and way of life during the 6 months he spent with them. When General George Crook eventually rescued him, Jimmy expressed an unexpected desire. He wanted to stay with the Apache, having grown attached to their lifestyle. This photograph captures the unusual bond formed between captor and captive, showing a side of Wild West life that defied the usual narratives of violence and revenge. Though Jimmy's story of captivity is one of survival, many others ventured below ground, searching for treasures far beneath the surface. Mining played a crucial role in the economy of the Old West, and few mines were as prominent as the Gould and Curry and Savage mines in Virginia City, Nevada. Silver mining in this region became a booming industry in the mid-19th century, attracting countless workers hoping to strike it rich. In the photograph, a miner is seen nearly 900 feet underground, where the conditions were far from ideal. Unlike modern-day mining, these workers relied on crude lighting methods, such as burning magnesium wire, to illuminate the dark tunnels they toiled in. The discovery of silver deposits in Virginia City transformed the town into a thriving boomtown, with the population peaking at 25,000 residents. However, as the mine's output decreased, so did the population. By 2010, only around 850 people remained in the once bustling town. While miners toiled underground, above, saloons became the heart of Western towns, serving those seeking both respite and excitement. Saloons were an iconic fixture of the American frontier, where cowboys, soldiers, fur trappers, and miners gathered for drinks, gambling, and even more illicit activities. But did you know that the very first saloon was established in Wyoming in 1822? It marked the beginning of a long tradition that would see saloons become central to the social fabric of the Wild West. By 1880, these establishments had become commonplace across the West, offering a wide variety of services beyond just drinks. Bartenders held high status in these communities, as the cleanliness and reputation of their saloons were a source of pride. However, not all saloons were known for their respectability. Many served as fronts for gambling, harlotry, and opium dens. In the shadow of the saloon's smoky back rooms, a different kind of business flourished, one where women wielded both power and secrecy. In the Wild West, women who worked as prostitutes, known as soiled doves, were often as infamous as the outlaws they served. This photo captures a group of soiled doves in the Old West, posing alongside a male patron in a typical parlor room setting. These women came from all corners of the world, facing difficult conditions but often rising to prominence in the saloons and brothels where they worked. Some even became millionaires, carving out their own success stories in a male-dominated world, known by a variety of names depending on the region, such as Ladies of the Line in California or Nymphs du Prairie elsewhere. These women took on unique personas to protect their identities. They played a significant role in the economy and social life of the Wild West, often being more accepted than one might assume given the harsh moral climate of the era. But life in the West wasn't just about money and reputation. Behind closed doors, the practicalities of survival meant even something as simple as a bath was a shared experience. The luxury of a bathtub was beyond the reach of most families in the Wild West. In fact, many homes lacked proper tubs altogether, and it wasn't until the advent of mail-order catalogs such as Sears, Roebuck & Co. in 1894 that affordable bathtubs became more accessible to the average household. Even then, the cost of a tub, equivalent to nearly $800 in today's money, meant that families had to make do with what they had. As a result, families often shared the same bathwater, with each person taking turns in the tub, starting with the head of the household and working down to the youngest. This practice led to the tradition of the Saturday night bath, where everyone would clean up in preparation for Sunday church. While the idea of sharing bathwater may seem strange today, it was a practical solution for families living in the rugged and resource-limited conditions of the Old West. As families found ways to cope with the challenges of frontier life, figures like Soapy Smith were building empires, one con at a time. Jefferson Randolph Soapy Smith II was an infamous con artist and gangster, remembered for his notorious scams and criminal empires that spanned across the American frontier and the Klondike Gold Rush. Born on November 2, 1860, in Coweta County, Georgia, Soapy earned his nickname through his infamous prize soap racket, a clever street con where he sold bars of soap wrapped in dollar bills to unsuspecting crowds, only for the money to always end up with his accomplices. His operation grew into full-fledged criminal empires in Denver, Colorado, and Creede, with him controlling not only illicit gambling and rigged games, but also having the local police and politicians in his pocket. By the 1890s, his reach extended to Skagway, Alaska, where he established himself as a powerful figure during the Klondike Gold Rush, even setting up a fake telegraph office to swindle gold rushers out of their fortunes. Soapy's criminal reign came to an abrupt end on July 8, 1898, when a gunfight broke out on Juneau Wharf in Skagway between Soapy and Frank Reed, a member of the local vigilance committee. Both men were fatally wounded, marking the end of Soapy's life at the age of 37. After his violent end, an autopsy was conducted on his corpse, as seen in the photograph. While Soapy's reign of deception came to a violent end in Alaska, the strange tales of outlaws meeting their fate didn't stop there. Just a few years later, another outlaw would find himself the subject of one of the Wild West's most bizarre posthumous tributes. One of the more bizarre stories from the Wild West comes from the aftermath of the Canyon Diablo shootout, which took place in 1905 in Arizona Territory. After a botched robbery at the Wigwam Saloon in Winslow, Arizona, bandits William Evans and John Shaw fled but were tracked down by lawmen. A standoff ensued near Canyon Diablo, resulting in the death of Shaw and the wounding of Evans. Shaw's body was buried in a pine wood coffin in a shallow grave, but that was not the end of his story. Later that night, a group of cowboys, fueled by whiskey and curiosity, decided to have one last drink with Shaw. They rode to Canyon Diablo, exhumed his body, and propped it up against a fence. The eerie photograph you see here captures that moment, showing Shaw's lifeless body posed next to two cowboys. After they gave him a final toast, they returned his body to the grave, placing a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. This strange incident became part of the legendary lore of the American West, capturing both the audacity and eccentricity of frontier life. As men like Shaw faced their fates on the dusty roads of the West, women like the soiled doves of Dawson City were quietly making their own mark, one billiard shot at a time. In the late 1890s, during the height of the Klondike Gold Rush, towns like Dawson City became bustling hubs of activity, and brothels were at the heart of this boomtown culture. These women, such as the ones seen in the image playing billiards, were not only part of the social fabric, but also key players in the economic life of the frontier towns. With limited opportunities for women in other professions, many turned to this line of work, drawn by the promise of wealth in the Klondike. The image portrays a soiled dove in suggestive attire, common for women working in brothels. Her pose at the billiard table reflects the informal, playful nature of these establishments, which were often intertwined with saloons and gambling halls. Billiards was a popular pastime, and brothels often served as social hubs for men seeking entertainment beyond just gambling or drinking. The provocative clothing and casual stance show how these women used their presence to attract customers, blending sensuality and leisure. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, take a look at this other video right here. And don't forget to subscribe